Hallo, welkom op deze examentraining VWO Engels 2012, tijdvak 2. En vandaag gaan we ons bezighouden met de tekst Getting the Message at Last. As usual, when we start with a new text, we want to get a general impression of the text and of the questions. So let's look at the text first. Here goes. All right, getting the message at last. A parable of manners from Victorian dentists to modern airlines. A parable. Dat lijkt op het Nederlands woord parabel. En dat is zoiets als een sprookje met een les erin. A parable of manners. Dus het gaat over manieren. Over wat je wel en niet kan doen in sociaal verkeer, over manieren. From Victorian dentists to modern airlines. Nou, Victorian, dat slaat op een bepaalde tijdperk in de Britse geschiedenis. De koningin Victoria koningin was een hele lange periode. 19e eeuw. Oké, we kijken even naar de tekst. Oeps, en wat zien we? What do we see? We see gaps. This is a gap text. Starts with 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So 5 times you need to, 6 times you will need to fill in something in a gap. All right. What else do we see? The Economist. And The Economist is a conservative magazine. All right. Anything else that strikes us as odd or interesting? A picture of somebody using an old-fashioned telephone. All right, let's have a look at the questions and see what they tell us. Here goes, the questions. Yeah, as we thought, here you have the various alternatives with each question. 4 alternatives, 3 alternatives, all right. Every time when you have a text with a gap, with gaps to fill in, make sure you understand each and every alternative. So if you don't know the word, you'll have to look it up. If you're watching this video and you don't know all of these words, pause the video for a moment and get your dictionary and write down the translations of all these alternatives of questions 6 through 11 next to the English words, so that you have the Dutch translation ready at hand when you start working with the text. If you wait with looking them up when you come upon a gap in the text, then if you have to look up the words at that time, you will lose the thread, you will lose the gist of the article. It's important to have the words already translated before you start reading. So pause the video now and start recording your translations for all these alternatives, questions 6 through 11. All right, let's have a look at your translations. Confusing, verwarrend, poorly timed, slecht getimed, rather obscure, nogal duister, unsolicited, ongevraagd. Question 7. A cause for complaint, een reden om te klagen. Further free publicity, nog meer gratis publiciteit. Proof of their success, bewijs van hun succes. Question 8. Etiket, net als het Nederlandse etiketten. Dus de manier waarop dingen zouden moeten in het sociale verkeer. Sincerity, oprechtheid. C. The impact of advertising, de invloed van advertenties. Question 9. Adversity, tegenslag. Deceptions, teleurstellingen. Miscommunication, miscommunicatie. Social minefields, sociaal mijnenveld. Question 10. Complicate matters. Zaken ingewikkeld maken. B. Make guidelines pointless. Zorg ervoor dat de richtlijnen geen zin hebben. C. Promote communication. Communicatie promoten. Solve these problems. Deze problemen oplossen. 11. An admirable attempt. Een bewonderenswaardige poging. A near impossible task. Een bijna onmogelijke taak. An unusual situation, een ongebruikelijke situatie. An urgent matter, een urgente zaak. Oké, wat we nou gaan doen is we gaan terug naar de tekst en we lezen elke keer een stukje tot we aan een gat komen, aan een gap. En dan lezen we nog een stukje verder om te zien dat de woorden die we invullen passen bij wat er aan vooraf gaat en wat daarna komt. Alright, let's start reading the text now. A Parable of Manners. On a May evening in 1864, several British politicians were disturbed by a knock at the door and the delivery of a telegram, a most unusual occurrence at such a late hour. Had war broken out? Had the Queen been taken ill? They ripped open the envelopes and were surprised to find a message relating not to some national calamity, but to dentistry. De tandartspraktijk. Mr. Gabriel of 27 Harley Street advised that their dental practice would be open from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. until October. Infuriated, some of the recipients of this message wrote to the Times. I have never had any dealings with Mrs. Gabriel, thundered one of them, and begged to know by what right do they disturb me by a telegram which is simply the medium of advertisement. The Times helpfully reprinted the offending telegram, providing its senders with blah blah blah. All right, let's return to what happened actually. So what we read in the first paragraph is that there's a couple of politicians having a drink at night, and then suddenly there's a telegram. And they read the telegram thinking it's something urgent. And what they find out is pure advertisement. Infuriated, some of the recipients, woedend, een aantal van de mensen die het ontvangen hebben, of this message wrote to the Times. What type of message is this? It's a message that they received unexpectedly at a very late hour. Let's have a look at the questions. What are the options? What type of message was it? A confusing message. No, it was not a confusing. It was very clear. A poorly timed message. That could be, because it was late at night and they weren't expecting anything. Rather obscure, again, it was a very clear message, so rather obscure is not correct. Unsolicited, that could be right as well. So we'll have to look at the text, whether it's B, poorly timed, or D, unsolicited. Let's have a look at the text. Now, let's see if we have an indication of it's having to do with the time, such a late hour, it says here. And then later on, it says that person is really angry because what right do they have to disturb me by a telegram, which is simply the medium of advertisement? And he doesn't mention anything having to do with time. So it's the writer who talks about time here, but the person who's complaining is just saying it is a medium of advertisement. What right do they have to send me a telegram with an advertisement? So that means that the answer to question 6 would have to be unsolicited, een ongevraagde boodschap. Right, and then he writes a letter to the Times, and then the Times helpfully reprinted the offending telegram, providing its senders with. Dus ze hebben dat opnieuw afgedrukt in de krant. En daarmee de verstuurders van het telegram voorzien van wat? Of course, further free publicity. Okay, let's continue. This was, notes Matthew Sweet, a historian, the first example of what is known today as spam. We're all familiar with spam, right? Stuff coming into your mailbox and you haven't asked for it. It shows that new communications technologies have been prompting questions about ever since the advent of the telegraph in the 19th century. The pattern is always the same. A new technology emerges on the scene, and nobody can be quite sure how it will be employed or what the appropriate guidelines are. So users have to make up the rules as they go along. I'm going to highlight that. As you will see often in articles, each individual paragraph functions as a small article in and of itself. Usually the first line in a paragraph is sort of like an introduction, and the last line is sort of like a conclusion. And so here we see the users have to make up the rules as they go along. Now let's have a look at the gap. It shows that new communications technologies have been prompting questions about ever since the advent of the telegraph in the 19th century. So ever since the telegraph was invented, lots of new technologies have come into existence, and every time we'll have to make up the rules. That's what the concluding sentence says. So here have been prompting questions about something having to do with rules. Let's have a look at the questions to see if something strikes us as having to do with rules. We see etiquette, sincerity, the impact of advertising. Etiquette clearly has to do with rules. So the answer here is etiquette. Let's continue reading. When the telephone appeared in the 1870s, people worried about receiving calls from people to whom they had not been properly introduced. And what should one say when picking up the receiver? En mensen waren helemaal onwennig, had no idea how they should treat this telephone or a message coming in. Alexander Graham Bell, the inventor of the telephone, suggested, "Ahoy, ahoy!" But, as in many other respects, his ideas lost out to those of Thomas Edison, who preferred "hello," an expression that was rarely used before the telephone, but is now ubiquitous. Dus toen de telefoon pas eerst in gebruik was genomen, wisten de mensen eigenlijk niet goed hoe ze ermee om moesten gaan. En op een gegeven moment heeft Thomas Edison hello geïntroduceerd, en sindsdien is dat een woord geworden wat heel veel gebruikt wordt. Further awaited. Nou, we hebben geen idee wat er dan nog meer kwam. Awaited. Zat in de coulissen, met andere woorden, wachten op ons. En dat komt dus nu. Dus nu moeten we dit stukje lezen om te weten wat ze met dat awaited bedoelen. Want stond op ons te wachten. In 1903, the trade journal Telephony reported an elderly woman's complaints about her niece, who received a phone call from a male friend while dressing. The two of them stood talking to one another just as if they were entirely dressed, and had stopped for a little chat on the street. I tell you, this generation is too much for me, she grumbled. Dus die dame die vindt dat het echt niet kan. Dat je niet in je ondergoed aan de telefoon kan staan. Dan vindt ze dat niet kan. Nou, dus als je hier zegt further, awaited. Nou, en als je dan weet dat hier iemand zo geschokt is, dan gaan we even kijken wat daar het beste bij past. Bij een geschokt mevrouwtje. Dan moet de dingen wel doen, daar gaat hij. Oké. Adversity, deceptions, miscommunication, social minefields. Which of those four fits with somebody who's shocked? Of course, social minefields. Dus het antwoord is social minefields. Let's turn back to the text and fill in social minefields. Further social minefields awaited. En dan is dit een voorbeeld van zo'n sociaal mijnenveld. Die bom die voor die mevrouw is afgegaan, figuurlijk gesproken. Let's continue reading. Subsequent inventions, dus uitvindingen die daarop volgden, have posed further tricky questions. Is it appropriate to dump your boyfriend by fax? When sending a message to several friends by email, should you put all of their addresses into to field and so reveal them to all the recipients? Or should you send the message to yourself and BCC everyone else? Answer B. How should you respond if your boss friends you on Facebook? Does a thank you letter count if it is sent electronically? The technology that has done most to of course, is the mobile phone. Because it can be used almost anywhere and is used by almost everyone, it has the greatest potential for social disruption. This is a tip for reading text. Whenever you see something that's in brackets, skip it at first. Perhaps there's a question about that part in brackets, but usually there isn't. So if you understand the sentence, actually, it's easier to understand the sentence if you first read it, skipping the part in brackets. In the rich world, at least. Okay, I'm going to read the sentence again. Because it can be used almost anywhere and is used by almost everyone, it has the greatest potential for social disruption. Bleeping inappropriately in theaters, churches and concert halls, subjecting bystanders to tedious diatribes on trains and buses, and distracting people in restaurants. Dus hier wordt beschreven wat voor irritant gedrag dat allemaal tot gevolg heeft, die mobile phone. The technology that has done most to, of course, is the mobile phone. Dus dat bedoelen ze eigenlijk vanaf het moment dat die telegram werd bezorgd en toen met de introductie van de telefoon, moeten de mensen allemaal wennen aan nieuwe regels, nieuwe technologie. En wat voor regels spreek je daar dan over af? Nou, en dan de new technology, of the technology that has done most to, is the mobile phone. Dan gaan we kijken welk antwoord daarbij past. Bij 10. Complicate matters, make guidelines pointless, promote communication, solve these problems. Nou, B weet wel vast dat niet goed is, want het is nog helemaal niet opgelost. Promote communication, nou dat is misschien wel waar, maar daar gaat het artikel helemaal niet over. Het gaat juist over dat er allerlei problemen zijn, dat mensen niet goed weten wat ze afgesproken hebben met elkaar. Make guidelines pointless. Nou, dat past niet. Wat past is complicate matters. Het is die mobile phone is nog weer een nieuwe technologie waar je weer afspraken over moet maken. Dus het antwoord is 10a. Let's get back to the text. These are the examples of how mobile phones impact our lives. No public event is now complete without a request that phones be switched off. New paragraph. Given the industry's long history of introducing new gizmos without much thought for their social knock-off effects. Gizmos zijn hebbedingetjes, nieuwe technologie dingetjes. Without much thought for the social knock-on effects. Dus die worden geïntroduceerd zonder dat iemand maar nadenkt over wat voor sociale implicatie die hebben. The extension of mobile phone coverage to aircraft now underway represents a striking and welcome change. Nou, dit is een examen uit 2012, dus toen was dat nog underway, dat ze nadachten over hoe kunnen we mobile phone op het vliegtuig op de een of andere manier reguleren. Zodat mensen het wel kunnen gebruiken, maar dat anderen er geen last van hebben. Ik lees het nog eens. Given the industry's long history of introducing new gizmos without much thought for the social knock-on effects, the extension of mobile phone coverage to aircraft, now underway, represents a striking new welcome change. It is for 3 reasons. En dus hier wordt gezegd dat er een verandering plaatsvindt. Deze uitbreiding van de mobile phone in een vliegtuig is en dat ze daar dus bezig zijn om dat op de een of andere manier te reguleren, is een welkome verandering. It is for 3 reasons. En er volgen hier 3 redenen. Namelijk, planes are one of the few remaining places where mobile phones do not work. They bring together people from different cultures, and airlines are in a position to enforce whatever in-flight rules they decide upon. Oké, dus we zien hier dat er dus iets nieuws gebeurt. En dan zien we hier waarom het iets is. En dan met 3 redenen. Gaan we naar de vraag kijken. An admirable attempt. A near impossible task. An unusual situation. An urgent matter. Nou, we hebben gezien dat het een verandering was. Dus tot nu toe al die nieuwe technologieën vanaf de telegram, door de telefoon en alle e-mail, fax, noem maar op. En nu is er opeens iets anders. Nu gaan ze daar opeens wel over nadenken over wat de sociale regels zouden kunnen zijn. Dus dan kom je vanzelf uit op an unusual situation. 11C is the correct answer. All right, that was it for today. Thanks for joining. I hope to see you next time. Goodbye.